and ugly things will happen, and it's not going to be that nice anyway. You're going to think it's fast. It's because you're on the ragged edge of insanity and death at all times. What's up, people? We should talk about engine swaps and engines, because that's awesome, and I know everybody wants to LS swap the world. And everybody's getting crazy, putting rotary engines in Corvettes. What has the world come to? I thought just putting turbine engines in Batmobiles would good. And I saw that Tavarish or whatever, I think, is going to put a turbine engine, an Allison Rolls-Royce variant, into a Testarossa. Well, yeah, that'll be fun, but dude, that's going to suck. And so let's talk about that. How do you know if you can engine swap something? What's a good idea? What's a bad idea? And how do you do these things when there's no kit? Okay, so this person wrote to me, and this is why. His name is Michael, and he writes, I recently messaged you on Instagram about making an informational video about swapping engines into cars that were never designed to have them without using bolt-in kits. If you would address this, that'd be awesome. I've wanted to do this for a long time, but not what details to watch out for has been a huge hindrance in me starting this, Michael. Okay, so guys, engine swaps in cars. It really comes down to two things, okay? Just forget about the engine and transmission or transaxle in a car. Just take them out. And whatever your vehicle is, I don't care if it's a three-wheeled vehicle or a car or a motorcycle, an Indy car, a Batmobile replica or something, it's a vehicle. Let's just call it a roller, okay? Now that roller has so much space in it, open space, with which to put a power plant, okay? It has particular kinds of suspension, particular kind of brakes, and it has so much structure that's able to handle different weights, different stresses, different torsions, etc. That's one item. Your second item is in fact the engine and whatever your transmission or transaxle is, to take that rotational energy of the engine and convert it into different speeds or torques and put it to the wheels. Okay, there's your second item. The first one is spatial considerations. Will the engine reasonably fit? And I say reasonably, because if you have to make if you have to like absolutely, there's no room for headers and they're going to flow like garbage, and you're cutting into wheel wells and the suspension, and you're totally changing the car and widening it, and it doesn't fit, and you need a hood bulge so big you can't see over it, and the transmission requires this crazy tunnel and you have to sit sideways in the car, okay, you're probably picking the wrong engine for the car already. Okay, so one, will it reasonably fit? Okay, is your first consideration. The next one should be weight. How much does the engine weigh and transmission, and where is that weight in the structure of the car compared to what it was before? Because cars in general, if it's not a total custom build, okay, or something that people have done before that they know about, were designed with a particular engine. Generally speaking, it's always great if you can go lighter. That means the car was built to accept something heavier and possibly bigger, and now you're putting in something lighter weight. At most, you're going to have to change like maybe spring rates and dampening a little in the suspension. But if you're going lighter, it can oftentimes be better. Unless, of course, the car was balanced and had this big giant boat anchor in the front, and now you made it lighter weight, and now the front's going to be lighter weight, something like that. Okay? And you guys can extrapolate all the different directions where that would come about. So spatial consideration and weight. Your first two most important things. The next one is, what are the characteristics of said engine? Okay? If you're putting something bigger in, or something that generates more heat that needs a cooling system, do you in fact have room left to have an adequate cooling system? And I'm not saying, well, we're going to put like 10 radiators in the trunk and we're going to put one over there and we're going to put some over here. If you have to do that, this is already absurd and you're probably picking the wrong motor or engine. Motor is an electric motor, whatever. It's kind of like pterosaur and dinosaur, okay? You're probably picking the wrong one in that circumstance, so it's something to think of. And, you know, who wants to, well, if I burn alcohol, then I could have a smaller cooling system. Well, yeah, but then it's going to do all kinds of crazy things to your fuel system and oil, and where can you buy alcohol on the street that normally? So, you know, relax. So those are getting into it, and as far as the characteristics. In terms of the turbo shaft engine, I'll get into that has absolutely weird, funky characteristics, and I think it's Tavarish that wants to do it in his Testarossa. Yeah, that's really exciting, and it'll fit, and the exhaust will dump well and everything like that, but that car is going to be slow as it all get out off the line. because when I saw he wasn't doing anything with the transmission, and those things have such wacky characteristics in their ability to make power and having to power brake them and all, it's just, what are you doing, dude? You'd be better off putting an LS in it if you can find a trans axle that'll actually fit. But I digress. We'll come back to that. So let's say that you're being reasonably intelligent and putting the engine in the same place in the car that was intended. So if it was a front engine car, you're putting a front engine in again. And if it's longitudinal, it stays longitudinal. If it's transverse, it stays transverse. So it's kind of like the guys that'll put a V6 from a front engine car into an MR2. That's kind of cool. That can fit. It packages tricky, but you got something that's smaller and cooler, and sort of like an NSX on a budget if you're a cool builder. Of course, I've seen things in the past where guys will put LS engines in everything in the front. For movies, there's cars that had V12s in the front that they put an LS in. You know, whether you like it or not, an LS engine makes a lot of power. It's reasonably lightweight, and it's a size that fits in a lot of things. I got a Marine buddy that's got a Nissan 300ZX from like the mid-90s that's got an LS engine in it. It's really cool. It fits. It sort of makes more heat up there, so he has to worry about that. It's mated to, I believe, the stock Nissan's transmission they used, and you know, the clutches and everything are made to work. But some of the issues he ran into was the starter was made to start an engine with less displacement. So stuff like that you have to think of, the little things. But he was able to make it cool well, and it works reasonably well. And the differential in the transmission is strong enough to take that, as long as you're not sidestepping the clutch and being a total buffoon on the car, or building giant, massive amounts of power. So those are the other things to consider. If you're putting in engines that make massive amounts of power in a car that wasn't remotely made to handle it, then you're going to have to change bloody well everything to make it decent. Otherwise, you're just making an overpowered hot rod. And you're going to be one of those persons like, hey, I put in a giant motor and this little piece of garbage is so fast. No, it wasn't fast. It didn't hook up. It broke all the time. You couldn't control it. The brakes sucked. It was slightly undrivable and dangerous the whole way through. But congratulations, if you want way overkill and way overpower, you might try winning the lottery too. That'll probably be fun for you, even though you have no idea what to do with all that money, or no idea what to do with all that power in your crummy little hot rod. So, do you know what I'm saying? Pick something that's going to match well for the chassis that you're putting into it. The people that do things that are way overkill, it's like, congratulations. That's not really that lasting cool. The biggest thing is spatial constraints, and I'll give you an example. So the turboshaft engine that I put in that Batmobile repo that I built was a Boeing T50 variant, I believe. At the time, it was reasonably, I could reasonably find one, and the price was good. Getting an Allison or Rolls-Royce 250 type variant, like what I think Tavarish wants to put in that Testarossa, those punks are kind of expensive. Back in the day, I think the cheapest you get one of those engines, like a timed out one from the military, like junk to the military, but okay for civilian use, it's like 15, 20 grand. That was cheap. So unless you're finding a smoking deal on one, you're going to spend a lot of money on it. The one that I found, I think I had about 5 grand in it, so that was real reasonable. But as far as the turboshaft engine goes, it really came down to 2 things. Spatial consideration. It would fit. Wasn't like that much bigger than a normal one. And in terms of its logistics, or its specifications, it had an output shaft that spun the same direction as a normal reciprocating engine, and its usable RPM range was 0 to 6,000, which is effectively the same as a normal reciprocating engine, okay? So it really only just came down to adapting the output flange, where the planetary gear set is, and the output female shaft to a transmission. So I had an inch thick aluminum billet plate that I machined to fit on there, and then have a support bearing, okay? And then I drew up, actually on paper, old school, a special shaft to be made by Mark Williams out in the United States West. They make really great gears and shafts and CV boots, things like that. And what it was is, it had the male splines to fit into the output, female output shaft of the turboshaft engine. It had a journal surface to ride in the bearing on that mounting plate. And the output flange I made to be the same as a small block Chevy. So effectively, I converted the turboshaft engine to have the same output as a small block Chevy and the same bolt pattern as that. Made my life really easy to convert it. A turboshaft engine isn't real good for trying to have a manual gearbox with a clutch and all, because they don't spool up and down real fast like a normal one. It worked better for an automatic. I simply chose the direction of going of actually just put the flex plate on it. I put a torque converter on it, believe it or not, and that's not necessarily necessary because it's already fluid, so to speak, but it was just easier. And I adapted that to a 4-speed 700 R4 automatic transmission that I modified to have a manual valve body only and would not shift automatic. And then for the turboshaft engine, it had 2 tachometers on it, one for the gas generator in the front, which makes the thrust, which makes the power, so I can know how much power we're making depending on the throttle position and the RPMs of that. And then the second one was the output shaft of the actual turboshaft engine, the 0 to 6,000 RPMs. If we're getting up close to 6,000 RPMs, I know I got to upshift or we're going to overspeed it. And if you're in a taller gear but you're down the RPMs, you can downshift to make more torque. It would be totally viable potentially to eliminate the torque converter, but that requires more modification and just a pain in the butt. And I figured it would kind of help soften blows and such. And it worked perfectly fine. So that's how I went that direction. But spatially consideration, it worked great. In terms of its usability, I adapted it to the transmission. That worked great. Then it was a matter of mounting it properly using good fundamentals there. Now, a turboshaft engine has some wacky considerations. One, massive amounts of very hot exhaust, not like a reciprocating engine. A reciprocating engine uses the explosion to act upon a piston. Most of the energy goes there and the exhaust comes out, little tubes that get hot and make noise. In turboshaft engine, it's creating thrust internally blown across what is effectively a fan, and that fan is there connected to the output shaft through planetary gear sets and such. So it's blowing a lot of air, okay? Blowing a lot of exhaust and hot gases that come out. And there's 2 approximately 7-8 inch stacks out of really high grade stainless steel that comes blown out the side at 45-degree angles. So I had to make sure that in a turboshaft engine, I could vent the gases effectively and safely. That was a big consideration of it. It also had a big oil cooler, which was actually used on the turboshaft engine stock. I just moved it to a different location in the front to where I could blow air on it. The stock location was on the bottom, and it used effectively the exhaust gases coming out kind of as an augmenter to draw a low pressure and bring cool air through the oil cooler. Since I was going to have exhaust coming way out the side of a ground vehicle car, I moved the oil cooler to the front with a fan. Just a consideration you have to do. Beyond that, there was no water cooling system in a turboshaft engine. Doesn't need that because most heat just goes out the exhaust. And then it's just a matter of being able to get your fuel to it and throttle it and doing the things you need and making that work. So when you are considering engines for cars, whether you're doing a swap, do think of your value. Is this going to make your car more saleable? Are you building something that's a worthwhile asset where you're dumping in your investment of time and money? I think, is it Rob Dahm that's doing the rotor swap in his Corvette? I mean, that's cool and that's kind of fun, but frankly, that's just a YouTube novelty. He's going to need to recoup his money for that on YouTube or hope a crazy fan pays him too much money for it, because a car like that is going to have a garbage resale value. It just is. It's just going to have a garbage. Nobody wants a Corvette with a rotary engine in it. There's no market for that, so to speak. So think about that. He's doing it just for fun. He likes the Corvette, I guess, and he finds rotary engines to be fascinating. And that's cool, man. It's all about being innovative in America. LS engines are a great bet for making a lot of cars really cool. And electric conversions are really, really fantastic. Of course, you get into a lot of other constraints, but they're the same things what we're talking about. Do you have the spatial considerations and the logistic considerations to make that work? And are you going to be able to execute it safely and make that happen? There are some people that have so-called Tesla swapped vehicles, because Teslas end up totaling out really easily, so you can buy them salvaged pretty cheap. And that's really neat. Of course, with the batteries, be careful. They can be a dangerous commodity, and you need to have a good understanding and use good safety practices when you're utilizing those. But of course, we have to do the same thing with gasoline. It's just that batteries can create a lethal surprise for you really fast if you don't know what you're doing. The 2JZ motors are pretty cool. People really like those, put them in. But some of those things get into cost. You got engines that are flat or horizontally opposed, boxer engines. You get V-configurate engines. You got VR6 type motors where it's real narrow grease, same block like Volkswagen used. You've got engines that are straight. It just depends on what you want to fit in what. And there are engines that, frankly, I think you're better off for building. So I'll give you an example. A DeLorean, really neat car. DeLorean, as the company, and especially the car, were really just obliterated by the media back then. Truth to behold, they're actually a really great car, but all the baby boomers think they're crap because they were skewed by the media and all the controversy and stuff that befell DeLorean back in the day. And the engine, most hot rodders and muscle car guys think it's a garbage engine, the aluminum PRV V6. Single overhead camshaft, it's got rockers that, of course, push the valves and whatnot. And it didn't make a whole lot of power, but truth be told, back in the 80s, nothing made power. Ferraris were slow, Lamborghinis were slow, and the biggest thing was the Bosch Cagetronic fuel injection system. They were highly sensitive to vacuum. You couldn't put bigger cams in it with overlap. You couldn't have the compression you wanted, and it made the cars slow. It made everything slow. And the DeLorean was no exception. Now, with DeLoreans, geeks really like them, and I mean geeks in the most positive way possible. It's not like it's a big snob fest like Ferraris and Porsches and stuff. But the geeks like to build, they like to custom, they like to make things better. My one buddy with his DeLorean, he converted to electronic fuel injection, which is much better than the PRV for tuning it and running it more radical, and it's twin turbo, and that is super cool. It's still the same motor, still makes good power, twin turbo, which you could do in period, but electronic fuel injection, which frankly you could have done that in period, but people didn't want to spend the money. The other thing people do with DeLoreans is make them electric. That's kind of cool, but you want to give consideration to their weight balance because it's a rear engine car. If the PRV engine weighs X and you make the new engine in there heavier, you're going to be weight biasing terribly towards the rear of the car and over the rear axles, and you're going to make the handling characteristics funky at best or difficult to manage. It's not going to be the same nice car. So if you were engine swapping a DeLorean, you can't make it mid-engine based upon the nature of the chassis and the glass reinforced plastic shell, okay? That's not reasonably going to happen. You want to do something mid-engine, do a different car. So if you're going to make it a rear engine, you need to think about weight a lot. And it's not just making the springs, it's where is that polar moment of inertia. So people LS swap those, which is actually really cool, make a lot of power, and they fit. And I've even seen a Lotus Esprit V8 engine in it, but what are you doing with the weight? And are you pushing the ragged edge? Are you going to make something that's nicely manageable? Or are you just making a hot rod that's fast in a straight line and it's got bad dynamics turning? That's not real great, okay? So think about that. But where I'm going is, as an example with the DeLorean, the PRV engine is a pretty darn good motor as is. There's guys that build those engines, say like in England and Europe, for the Renault Alpine A310s. And that same variant was used in the later GT, I think this is GT V6 or V6, the Renaults, the later ones. Those were turbocharged. So it exists, the knowledge and the parts to make the PRV engines better in a DeLorean. And if I'm not mistaken, that engine variant was used to win rally championships in the Renault Alpine A310. It had downdraft Weber carburetors, naturally aspirated. They might have made it dry sump, but I think they made the better part of 300 horsepower, which the DeLorean's a pretty lightweight car. It's well under 3,000 pounds, whether you guys realize that or not, because there's a lot of myth about that. So if you go making one of those engines peppy and either backdating it to carburetors so you can run higher compression and more interesting camshafts and stuff, or you make it EFI and turbocharge it, you haven't screwed up the weight balance of the car. It's still the same, so it's a known quantity. You just made more power that way. You've kept the car's integrity intact with its lineage and how it was designed. And the other thing is you don't have to go into that whole rigmarole of figuring out motor mounts and making it fit, and new cooling system and new wiring and mounting it to the different transaxle and clutches. All that stuff already fits, and that stuff is such a pain in the butt and gets expensive. So I am a big advocate and huge fan of keeping the same motor in a car that was there. Frankly, I've never done an engine swap. I don't really plan on doing an engine swap because I have a rule that is, if you have to spend more than a small percent of what your car costs to make it what you want, it's not the car you want. You should get something else. So as much as I love my buddy's 300ZX with the LS in it, I think that's cool. It's also silly because you can just go buy a Corvette. It's a car meant to have a V8 in it like that. It's going to last longer, be better without being cantankerous. And you'd be like, but Casey, it's my life ambition to have a weird Japanese car with a V8 in it. Well, that's cool, man. Do it. I'm just telling you, your life would be better off and easier and like longer lasting if you just went and bought a Corvette, which is the same thing. So you can hate me all you want. I'm just trying to be practical and help you guys out. And maybe when you get into building crazy hot rods and stuff that won't give you a good return on investment, you wait to do that later in life when you can afford the money and time. So those are things to think about also, like why are you doing this? Because even if it fits and even if there's motor mounts or even if you got a good welder and some basic fabrication skills and you can make this, it takes a massive quantity of time. In, out with the engines. Buying, adapter plates and stuff for transmissions. Adapting clutches to work with these. Putting a bigger motor on a smaller transmission with a small clutch that's not really made for that. And you're blowing up transmissions or transaxles, like in the case people put those Audi transaxles that's similar to what's in the back of a 944, but was in the 5-cylinder front-wheel drive Audis into like a GT40, replica where they put a V8 on it. Well, you're going to blow up the transmission. Or the transaxle, even if you're being nice to it, because it's not meant for that kind of power. Okay? So you get into a lot of issues with those kind of things, and you got little like racing-derived clutches, and you put it in there because that's the only thing that's so small that handles the power, but those clutches suck to use. They chatter or can chatter easy. They're like a light switch. They don't wear well, and it wears you out trying to drive a car like that on the street. Oh, Casey, you're a wuss. I drove a car like that back in the day. Yeah, well, so did I, and I didn't complain. But it doesn't mean it's not stupid. Okay? So think about these things when you're doing an engine swap. How big is it? Will it fit? Will the exhaust work? Will the cooling work? Will the wires work? Can you fabricate the engine mounts you need? What does it take to run it? What do all these little things that you don't want to actually think about cost? How long is it going to take you to do? Can you adapt it to the transmission? Can the transmission or transaxle handle the power? Is the car remotely acceptable for handling the power? Like, let me give you an example. Putting an LS in a Miata, also not a real good choice. I know you think it's all cool. It's like, with lots of power, it's going to be cool. No, it's not. You have a little tiny Japanese car that wasn't made for that, and ugly things will happen, and it's not going to be that nice anyway. You're going to think it's fast. It's because you're on the ragged edge of insanity and death at all times, which by all means, if that's what you want and it feels good, do it. It's like old school hot rod crap. But it doesn't mean hot rods were actually fast or can get around a road course or fun to drive or pleasant to drive or won't make your girlfriend or wife leave you because you're making ridiculous decisions and she hates being in the car and you're gone all the time. Okay, guys? Just thinking about it. This is real life with Casey Putsch and engine swaps. What up? Anyway, I hope this is good, food for thought for you all. But, engine swaps are a big thing. Don't take it lightly. You really have to have a good facility, the budget, the time, and some expertise to do it. That doesn't mean to say that a younger person isn't going to be successful at it. You just have to know how to learn how to think and assess a situation and know if you can reasonably do it. Sometimes there's things that have never been done, so then it's up to you to think about the things that we just talked about and research it well enough so you can make an educated decision on if this is a good move for you. And of course, if you take on the project, you get to do one of two things, not the third. You're going to see it through until it's done. You're going to do a good job, and you're going to enjoy it and eventually sell it or whatever and move on. Or you're going to get into the project and realize this is a terrible idea and I should not finish it for truly logical reasons like ROI or it's not going to happen. And then you need to reassess the situation and sell off the things and do as well as you can that you're not going to use and go a direction that it is. Okay, you take another course. Or you get into the project and realize this is a terrible idea, wasn't a good project, and finishing it is genuinely not worth it. It's not that I'm being lazy, but this is actually a bad idea and new information has come out. So you try to get out as best you can. And then the third one is you're all pie in the sky, bought all this stuff real quick, and found out it's really hard, you don't want to put the time into it, and you have a bunch of crap laying around. Well, that is not going to help your life. There's plenty of pack rat, pie in the sky goofballs that have done that. It's not good for you. I'll give you an example. That black Corvette up there, I frankly wish it wasn't here anymore, but it's a great asset for Genius Garage. It's won a lot of races, and someday when we have the time and the money, that'll be a great project. But in the meantime, it's just sitting there, and that's not my style. I don't like that. I don't think that makes very good personal, businessy kind of decisions, so don't be one of those people that just buy everything and then goes to the bar and talks, oh, I'm so cool, I'm going to do this project, I'm really cool, I'm so cool. No, you're not. You're cool if you finish the project, okay? Just wanted to tell you that. So don't be one of those guys. All right. Well, that's the food for thought. But keep it sane. Even in my insanity, I still make very sane and very good decisions with logistics and what can be reasonably done. And that's how I found whatever it is that people might consider these levels of success. I'm air quoting because it's still insane. So I hope you guys have fun. Maybe you learned something and got a smile out of this that you will. Like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next time.